East side, B side, what side are you on?
Well, hello. How's it going, Adam?
It's good. How are you, Brooke?
Good, good, good. So let's see what has happened in the world of entertainment this week. Let's see. We I'm trying to think. What have we talked about? What have I talked about on my show this week? Oh, Harry Styles drinking out of a shoe,
Yeah, that was weird.
the
But
Australian
it was
tradition of a shoey.
yeah, it was very Danny Ricciardo from Formula One.
Yeah. He only drank water. He said it was gross. Me, if it was me and I knew I was going to do this, I would have gotten a brand new shoe and just pulled it out of the box and done it. But still,
Yeah, I don't feel like that's in the spirit. Like you have to wear like it has to be the shoe you wore.
I tried
That's
it
kind of
on.
the thing.
It counts. I tried it on.
Fair. I mean, that's what made it so like weird for Ricardo when he would win a race. He'd have worn that shoe driving, and so he was kind of like thanking the shoe.
That's gross. And I can
It's
see
no,
why
it's
Harry
very
Styles says it was the most disgusting thing he's done.
yeah. I mean, Danny Ricardo also thinks it's gross, but he still does it, which is very weird. And so just to build on that, the Drive to Survive season 5, uh, just I think it's either coming out today or tomorrow
Hmm.
because the new season of F1 is just coming around the corner, and Danny Ricardo has become a huge star in the U.S. because of that show, and now he doesn't have a drive this year, so it's very weird. Even though
Oh.
like Red Bull basically just knocks some people around to give him like he's the backup. He's kind of the backup quarterback now.
Hmm.
So like if anybody gets injured, he'll drive.
Hmm.
But when he started the series out 5 years ago, he was on Red Bull, and he like the whole thing was about him leaving Red Bull and trying to do his own thing, and now he's back again. So it's a very weird thing, but you can see that like somebody had to have him on the roster because he's so like I mean,
Is
even to the
he
point
is he
where
a likable person?
oh, he's super likable. Like he's got this giant smile, and he's just like he's engaging, and he's clearly a very good driver. But he decided to chase being the best driver somewhere else with not
Hmm.
the best team, and it didn't work.
Ah, so now he's back.
Yeah, so now he's back with the team that has won the last two championships as sort of their backup guy, but also they're like ace in the hole. Like if somebody gets injured or somebody decides they want to go somewhere else, he's gonna be the next guy up. So
Right.
it's very interesting in that like I don't know that he would still be in F1 if not for the show, but he was so successful in the show and he's so famous. Like, there's no way Harry Styles does a shoey unless there was Netflix that made the shoey a thing,
Mm.
which is kind of amazing. Like, I,
See,
I
I
think
just
like
thought
he
it was
did
an
that.
Australian tradition. I didn't realize it was attributed to a race car driver.
No, like he's the one who made it a thing. Like,
Mm.
it may be an Australian tradition, but it wasn't a tradition that anyone would know about to the level that Harry Styles would feel like he could do it on a nationwide stage and get have anyone know what it was about
Hmm.
until Netflix.
Ah, gotcha.
Yeah. It was like if Netflix had a show about like appetizers and suddenly poutine was a thing that everyone knew about. And then Harry Styles would talk about poutine because he's from Canada.
Is poutine not something everyone knows about?
I don't think it is. I mean so this would I guess be a question for anyone listening. Like to me, poutine is not a thing that anyone knows about outside of like the upper Midwest. And
No, no,
I
no, no,
know
no. We
Buffalo
have
is no.
Mm.
I was gonna say I know Buffalo is not the upper Midwest, but Buffalo is very upper Midwest to me.
How is
I think
Buffalo very upper Midwest when it's on the East Coast?
culturally, because you're closer to
Geographically.
Canada. I mean like it's an idea. Like I feel like Buffalo has more in common with like Minnesota, Michigan, and Wisconsin than it does with like New York City
I think it's a
culturally.
good mesh.
But yeah, when you're close to Canada, you know about it. But like nobody in South Carolina, I would assume, has poutine on the menu.
Hmm. Interesting.
So I feel
No,
like
I take
poutine
that
is
back.
like
In
a
Bowling Green, there was a restaurant that did have it on the menu.
really.
Yeah, the White Squirrel.
Well, that must have come after my time.
Yeah. And I don't know like if whoever, did it is from somewhere else, but I do remember going, "Oh, they have poutine on the menu."
Because I grew up in Minnesota and I never heard of poutine. I moved away, I came back, and then poutine was a thing.
Hmm.
Like growing up, like poutine was not on the menu. Like for me, it's like a last 15-year thing, but I guess that's also a very long period of
Mm.
time.
Yeah. Yeah.
That just reminds me how old I am. Also reminding me how old I am. A meme that I shared to Instagram today, where somebody it was some like screenshot of like a Twitter conversation, right? And the
Hmm.
guy's like, well, you know, if you want to find somebody who's like ready to settle down, just look for people born between 1990 and 1999 because they're old and tired. They just want to like they're ready for settling down.
Pretty
And
much.
the response was like, what about the people born between 1980 and 1989? He's like, oh, you mean the ancestors? I was like, damn. I was like, okay, I guess. Like if you want to hear legends of phones with cords and like when we bought music, it came in a little box with a entire book about all the lyrics. That I guess, but that was harsh. I felt, but
um
then again, I'm 42, so I'm probably an ancestor at this point.
Um, oh, I did go to a show last week, which was pretty cool. It was my first ever Blake Shelton show, and I got to meet him. Very nice guy, very charming. I can see 100% why Gwen Stefani is taken with him because he is a very charming person. Um, very nice. My oldest sent me a voice message and was like, "Hey, can you play this for him?" So I was like, "Blake, I'm a mom and my daughter really wanted me to play this voice message for you. It's like 30 seconds. Do you mind?" And he was like, "No, play it." And she's like, "Hey, Blake, I really like you and I enjoyed watching you. I used to watch you on The Voice all the time and I just think you've got such a great personality." And, she said that. And then he goes, "Used to," which I thought was hilarious that that's what he zoned in on.
Fair. Yeah.
And then someone was like, "Well, yeah, you're leaving The Voice." And he's like, "Yeah, that's right. She probably has to just wean herself off of The Voice because I won't be there and it won't be the same," which I thought was hilarious. That like he just took it all in stride and was really sweet about it. And, because I mean, I know I put him in an awkward situation, but he didn't seem put out at all. And he genuinely was like listening to the voicemail. So I thought that was really cool. And he's just just a really charismatic person.
And again, as someone of the agents, he's leaving The Voice.
Yes. Yes. This is his last season of The Voice.
Was he? Is he got a different thing going on, or?
Well, he said he's wanting to focus more on family, but he also has another show. It's called I think it's based out of his bar Old Red in Nashville, and it's like I think that it's kind of a competition there.
Oh yeah, is it the like the bar crawl games or something?
Yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, and I feel like that's the type
Barmageddon. That's it. Barmageddon.
Barmageddon. That's the thing. Like you can record an entire season in like 2 weeks,
Mm-hmm.
and then just like air it because it seemed like they kind of made it seem like it was going to be like an event thing for like the holidays or so it's not going to be like an every Thursday thing where you have to commit as much time. I guess that makes sense.
No. Uh-uh. And then of course, he's on tour right now. So and
Yeah.
his stop here in Lincoln was the very first stop of his tour.
And the very
Um
second stop was here in the Twin Cities.
oh, was it?
Yeah, because I think he went on what was that like
I was
Thursday night or
on a
something?
Thursday night. Mm-hmm.
And I think on Saturday he was here in the Twin Cities,
Okay.
which I mean,
Okay.
makes sense. We're very close,
Mm-hmm.
ish. Are you getting snow right now?
No, we are not, thank goodness. But you are probably.
No, we're supposed to be, but it so far has been a complete bust.
Oh, okay.
Like they like both Minneapolis and St. Paul public school systems canceled Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. and went to like, because I guess it's not canceling, but you just go to online only,
Mm-hmm.
which is the thing everyone does. And like so many restaurants have closed, and right now is supposed to be the time when it's coming down heavy, and it's not snowing.
Well, as of like 2 days ago, I think they said we were going to get 6 inches, but that changed as of like yesterday or today.
Like we were supposed to get up, like at one point, the the doom merchants, also known as meteorologists, were claiming that we were going to get 30 inches of snow in 2 days.
Whoa.
And we've gotten 3 so far. And it's supposed to be heavy snow forecasted right now. I'm looking at the app until from now until noon tomorrow. And even my restaurant job decided they were closed today at 4 p.m. and not open until tomorrow at 4 p.m. And I think that was a mistake because there's literally not enough snow happening that it's a problem.
Yeah, because 3 inches is nothing for you.
No, I mean, even like a foot shouldn't be a thing, but it feels like they were just like, oh, well, it's going to be so scary. And then everyone, like when you're going to get a shot and then the doctor tells you about the shot, the anticipation of the shot is way worse than the actual shot.
Because by the time he finishes explaining it to you, he's already done it and you're still freaked out.
Yeah. You're like, oh, this is going to be horrible. It's like, oh, here's a little pinch. Don't even tell me, just do it. I'll be like, did you just pinch me?
Mm-hmm.
Because I won't know it's a shot. That's why my favorite dentist ever was a guy in Boston who barely spoke English, who took out my wisdom teeth. And he did not like warn me about anything. It was just like, close your mouth or close your eyes, open your mouth. And I was like, well, this could go very badly, but I'm going to do it. Pulling out my wisdom teeth. And I realized that like, I feel this because I am so drugged up. Like everything in my face is numb. And I feel this pressure against my face. I was like, okay, that's weird. So I open my eyes. And literally the man has his foot on the headrest of the chair get leverage to yank out, because my teeth, like my wisdom teeth were impacted from the other teeth. So there was a lot going on. It was not a good time. And he's got his foot on the headrest of the chair. So his foot is right next to my face. That's the pressure I feel. I open my eyes. I look him in the face. He just shakes his head. No. And I close my eyes again. So I'm like, I don't really want to know what's going on. And that was the best experience I've ever had at the dentist, because he was like, I'm not going to tell you about anything. I'm just going to do it because you don't really want to know what's happening.
Right.
And then he explained later that like the roots of my wisdom teeth were like corkscrews, and he had to like get in there and like uncork the bottle, which was my mouth. And I was like, that's not great. I feel like if you told me that, I would have felt that differently. But instead he's like, I'm just gonna do some stuff and trust me. And that was great. So that was a very
I don't know how to I was like, I don't know how to transition from that.
So I feel like, I guess long story short, I wish meteorologists would just be like, hey, it's gonna snow. And they'll be like, hey, that was a lot of snow. And we're like, yeah, it was. They'll be like, yeah, we didn't know how to tell you. So we just let it happen.
Oh man. All right. So this week we are on episode 125, which means I start. Unless you had anything else that you wanted, any shows or anything like that.
I mean, I've watched a lot of TV in the last week because it's been like cold and awful, and my phone's been barking at me for not walking enough. I have a new Amazon Halo, and it reminds you how many hours you've been sedative, which is not great because it has a lot to say recently. But nothing all that interesting. I've just been watching the same shows, so I don't think we need to go any further into my love for Bones or Leverage or any of that.
All right, so this is episode 125. So this week we are going to talk about a man named Gordon Stewart Northcott, who is responsible for what has been dubbed the Wineville Chicken Coop Murders. Picture it.
It sounds like a very bad like movie title.
I know, right? Something scary.
Like, coming up next on Lifetime, the Wineville Chicken Coop Murders. You're like, that doesn't sound like a romantic comedy.
I'm gonna channel Sophia from the Golden Girls here. Picture it.
Oh.
Southern California, 1928. She'd always do that.
Yes.
So Southern California was like a booming area, agriculture and the movies. Yes, the talkies, because the first talking film was actually in 1927, had taken over the area. Unfortunately, a string of kidnappings and murders in small town Wineville completely changed the landscape of the town. And again, these became known as the Wineville Chicken Coop Murders. Coming up next on Lifetime. So, Gordon Stewart Northcott was born November 9th of 1906 in Bladeworth, Saskatchewan, Canada, and he was raised in British Columbia. He and his family moved to Los Angeles in 1924. 2 years later, at the age of 19, Gordon asks his father to purchase a plot of land in the community of Wineville, which was located in Riverside County. Well, on this plot of land, Gordon builds a chicken ranch and a house, a coop, with the help of his father and his 13-year-old nephew, Sanford Clark. It was here that it was under the pretext of help from his nephew that Gordon was able to get his nephew, Sanford, to come to the U.S. Once his nephew, Sanford, got to the U.S. and arrived at the Wineville Ranch, unfortunately, things did not go very well for Sanford, because that's when the abuse started. And by abuse, what you think of abuse, that's what happened. On March 10th of 1928, a young 9-year-old Walter Collins goes missing. He's last seen about 5 o'clock in the evening by a neighbor. His mom, Christine, had given him a bit of money to go to see a movie. Again, the talkies, real popular in 1928. It's like, what's this new thing on the screen? There's sound.
Which, I mean, kind of sounds crazy, but can you imagine if you'd never seen a movie with sound? That'd blow your mind.
It'd be wild. It would be wild. Yeah. So Walter's father, Walter Sr., was actually incarcerated at Folsom State Prison, which, of course, we know, Johnny Cash, Folsom State Prison.
Yeah, I already singing the song.
He was incarcerated for 8 armed robberies. So once Walter went missing, police at the time believed that it was possible that it was enemies of Walter Sr. They get hundreds of leads, like tips are pouring in. They follow hundreds of leads, but it doesn't lead to anything. They are not successful. They're not able to find Walter.
Just to recap, this man was convicted of 8 armed robberies?
8 armed robberies. He was busy.
I mean, that's kind of impressive. I mean, that's a lot of armed robberies before you get convicted.
Yeah. He was real busy. I can see why they were like, it's probably an enemy. I mean, after 8 armed robberies,
You got some enemies and probably some accomplices that were like, hey, where's the money?
So, of course, they follow all these leads. They cannot find Walter. They're like, nothing they do, they're able to find Walter. So this topped with the fact that the LAPD was already under investigation for a bunch of different corruption scandals. Shocking. The LAPD and corruption. I've never heard of such ever.
I mean, to be fair, my first exposure to the LAPD was the TV show Dragnet. They seem very responsible.
Imagine since 1928, LAPD has been plagued with corruption, and they still have issues. Crazy. Like 100 years later, almost.
So evidently that 100-year plan is not working out.
Not at all. Unfortunately, Walter's not the only disappearance. Brothers Nelson and Louis Winslow, both they're 10 and 12, they end up missing May 16th of 1928 from Pomona, California. They're on their way home from a yacht club meeting. Their parents, once they go missing, their parents end up receiving a couple of odd letters from them. The first letter says, "We've gone to Mexico." Again, they're 10 and 12. It says, "We've run away to Mexico." The second letter states that they are going to stay in Mexico because they want to become famous.
For being in Mexico?
I don't know why you would. I don't know.
I mean, it's lot of people go to Mexico to become famous, and some of them become infamous. But
And well, there you go. So initially, the two sets of disappearances were not connected.
because only one set was going to get famous.
Right, only one wanted to be famous. Later, the matching paper that the boys wrote for or used for their letters, supposedly, was found in Gordon's ranch, but we'll get to that. So in August of 1928, police in Illinois, in DeKalb County, discover Arthur Kent. He's just like walking along the road, and they pick him up, and he claimed to be abandoned by his father and placed with a temporary family. Then he tells police, okay, my real name is actually Walter Collins. That's the young boy that disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
Letters and photographs were exchanged with Walter's mom, Christine, and she's convinced, okay, I've got to meet this boy. This is my Walter. So she pays for this Walter to be brought to Los Angeles from DeKalb County, Illinois. There's a whole public reunion organized by the police because obviously that looks good for them because they've not been able to find Walter and they're under this corruption scandal cloud. So, hey, we found Walter. Let's do this big, huge, grand public reunion.
Yeah.
So, of course,
we want the press because they're in LA. They want the press.
Right.
Get the adulation.
So, of course, they're hoping that this public reunion is going to deflect a little bit of their sullied reputation. At the reunion, Christine says, this is not Walter. But police captain J.J. Jones is like, hey, just take him home and try him out for a couple of weeks. Quote, try him out for a couple of weeks like he's furniture or some shoes.
Yeah, I don't even know many places to take furniture back after a week.
Try him out for a couple of weeks. So Christine is like, okay. 3 weeks later, Christine returns to see Captain J.J. Jones. And she's like, look, this is not Walter. This is not Walter. And she even had dental records proving that it was not her son. What does he do?
Mom came with receipts.
Mom brought all the receipts. What does the captain do? He doesn't listen to her like you would think. Oh, this is not your son. Okay, let's fix the problem. No, he has her committed to a psychiatric ward at the Los Angeles County Hospital under a code 12. That's a term used to commit someone who's been deemed difficult or inconvenient.
So hopefully this is not a code that is still in use. Otherwise, I cannot go to LA because I am nothing but difficult and inconvenient.
So while Christine's incarcerated in the psychiatric ward, the captain ends up finally questioning Walter, who admits that he's actually Arthur Hutchins Jr., a runaway who's originally from Ohio. His mom had passed away in 1925 when he was 9, and he'd been living with his stepmother, Violet Hutchins, and he ran away to get away from his stepmother, who he was having issues with.
I mean, classic Disney story. Kind of Hollywood, honestly.
While he's on the run, a drifter he meets at a cafe in Illinois tells Arthur Hutchins, hey, you know what? You look like this missing boy, Walter Collins. So Hutchins says, I've got an idea. So he decides to impersonate Walter. He says that his motive was to get to Hollywood so he can meet his favorite actor, Tom Mix. So I looked up Tom Mix. Tom was obviously a pretty big deal back in that time because he has 238 titles under his resume, including Why the Sheriff is a Bachelor, The Great K&A Train Robbery, and Destry Rides Again. Rumor has it,
kind of like he was like the guy at the top.
Yeah, and apparently he and John Wayne, he had a big issue with John Wayne because he was afraid John Wayne was going to rise up in the stardom and push him out of the spotlight, which it seems it did. He did, because I've never heard of Tom Mix a day in my life. But apparently
I've only heard the name because I feel like my father talked about him once, but I don't know that for sure.
Oh, you'll have to ask him.
Yeah.
But apparently
kind of did on the podcast.
Hey, Mr. Weingarten, do you know of Tom Mix?
I feel like he does.
Apparently, there's a rumor that when Tom Mix was riding high, like the peak of his career, he had all of his cars fitted with custom manufactured tires, specifically molded to leave tracks with his initials TM in the road. That was back in the 20s. That was back in the 20s, man.
Like, how is DiCaprio not just done that, but just like with like the number 26, so people know that that's how old you got to be below that
25,
to date.
25, right?
25
Yeah.
is it 25?
25,
When you
yeah.
hit 26, you're done.
You're out. So after 10 days, Christine Collins is released. And by this time, Arthur Hutchins has admitted that he is not, in fact, Walter Collins. She files a lawsuit against the department, the Los Angeles Police Department. On September 13th,
imprisonment and all that.
On September 13th of 1930, she wins the lawsuit against Captain Jones, and she's awarded $10,800, which in today's money would be almost $165,000.
Still feels kind of weak.
Yeah, it does. It does. He never pays.
Of course.
The last newspaper account of Christine is from 1941 when she attempted to collect $15,562 against then retired Captain Jones in Superior Court. And again,
so
got nothing.
It was like the city didn't owe any money?
I'm sure it was like the city and Captain Jones.
Yeah, but I mean, it sounds like she only like that it was the city was like, oh,
But
that
I
was his
mean,
fault, whatever.
But I wouldn't you if you were the city? Like, I didn't tell him to do that. He did that on his own. That was on Captain Jones.
He still works at the city. Come
on. So, in August of 1928, out of concern for Sanford Clark, his older sister, his 19-year-old sister, Jessie, decides to travel from Canada to Wineville to the ranch to visit. While she's there, Sanford tells her, look, I'm terrified. I'm terrified. One night while Gordon Northcott was asleep, Sanford tells Jessie, look, there's some bad stuff going on this ranch. He's murdered 4 boys on this ranch.
What?
Jessie goes home to Canada and she tells her mom. Her mom, Winifred Clark, then calls U.S. authorities to tell them that Gordon has kidnapped her son, Sanford, and also she tells him of the murdered boys, the kidnapped and murdered boys.
Mm.
Well, because it's 2 different countries, the consul has to get involved. They write letters to the Los Angeles Police Department, and they detail Jessie's sworn complaint and the mom's. Well, initially, there was some concern over immigration issues. So the LAPD contacts the United States Immigration Service to determine the facts relating the case. Right. So on August 31st of 1928, Immigration Service inspectors Judson Shaw and George Scalorn go to the ranch. Gordon sees the agents driving up because it's a ranch. He's got this big, long driveway, so you can see people coming. And there's something about government vehicles. You know them when you spot them. You're just, oh, that's a government vehicle. They just look like government vehicles, you know?
Yeah, I mean they tend to buy the same style every time. It's like right now it's like big black SUVs.
Right.
Like if they rolled up in like a 1980s like conversion van, no one would be that no one would see him coming. But instead it's like
well, you see the big black SUV.
Black.
Yeah,
it's
pretty
okay,
obvious.
So what's going on? Like you see like an 80s conversion van, you'd be like, what are those hippies doing up there?
Is that the Scooby Gang? So he sees the agents driving up his driveway, and so he runs. But as he's fleeing, he tells his nephew Sanford to stall them, and he says, if you don't, I'm going to shoot you from the tree line with this rifle. For the next couple of hours, Sanford stalls the agents as Gordon runs. Finally, after a couple of hours, he feels like, okay, he's got to be gone. And he tells the agents.
He stalls them for a couple hours?
Yeah.
Well played, kid.
Well played.
Like, what is he talking about? Like, is he just doing like a song and dance routine?
Hey, let me show you this ranch and all the things we've got on it. Yeah. Do you want some eggs? Let me make you an omelet.
Have you guys ever heard about Lord of the Rings? Let me tell you the entire story.
So finally, he feels like, okay, he's got to be far enough away. And he tells them everything. Well, Gordon has fled, and he finds his mom. Her name is Sarah Louise, and the two of them run off to Canada. Now, I know you love your kid and all, but if your kid is fleeing the law because he's murdered some kids, I'm sorry, no, I'm not. We're not fleeing together. No, we're not.
We certainly wouldn't go to Canada.
Well, they flee to Canada, but they're arrested near Vernon, British Columbia on September 19th of 1928. Sanford Clark ends up testifying against Sarah Louise. He tells of Gordon kidnapping, molesting, and beating the boys with the help of himself and Gordon's mother.
Oh.
He also testifies about the murder of a fourth young man, because remember, he told his sister there were 4. It was a young Mexican citizen, his name possibly Alvin Gothea, in La Puente. He had been decapitated, and Gordon forced Sanford to dispose of the body by burning it in a fire pit and then crushing the skull. Gordon left the body, San's head, by the side of the road near La Puente because he had no other place to put it. He said that he used quicklime to dispose of the remains and that the bodies were buried on the ranch. This is what Clark is saying, Sanford Clark. Based on what Sanford has told police are able to find 3 shallow graves on the ranch exactly where Sanford stated they would be. Unfortunately, the graves didn't have full, complete bodies. It was just body parts.
Right.
Sanford and his sister Jessie testify that Gordon and his mom had moved the bodies. They had dug them up and moved them on August 4th, 1928, a few weeks before Sanford was taken into protective custody. He said that they had taken the bodies to a deserted area where they probably burned them in the night. Complete bodies have never been discovered. Well, because of what Sanford was able to tell the police and the evidence that they were able to find in the graves, it was 51 parts of human anatomy. Because of all that, they were able to confirm the testimony. Because of the body parts, they were able, of course, to confirm what Sanford has told them. And then this evidence, along with his admission, they were able to conclude that Walter Collins, Lewis and Nelson Wilson, and the unidentified 4th victim had, in fact, all been murdered.
So, and this was the 1930s?
1928 to 19. Well, it happened in like 1928. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, I know I didn't want to talk about how much I've been watching Bones, but this sounds like a plot from Bones.
I know, right? It does.
And they figured this out in like the 1930s using Bones. Like, I thought Bones was very, very made up, but clearly it's not.
It's not. So the town of Wineville actually changes its name to one you have probably heard, Miraloma, which means view from the hill. They do that on November 1st of 1930, mostly because of the negative publicity surrounding the Wineville Chicken Coop murders.
So, ironically, the Salem witch trials, the trials took place in Salem, but the witches were actually from Salem on the Lake, which then also changed its name.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Sanford,
so I guess that was a thing, like back in the day. If something horrible happened, you're just like,
let's just change the name. Nobody will remember.
Not in this town. No, I was over there.
Yeah. So Sanford Clark, after this, he goes back home to Saskatchewan, and it looks like he lived his life there until June 20th of 1991 when he passed away. Like I mentioned, Gordon and his mom, Sarah Louise, they flee to Canada. They're arrested in Canada on September 19th of 1928. Well, there was some mix-up in their extradition paperwork, so they didn't end up back in Los Angeles until November 30th of 1928, which to me, in this day and time, knowing how long cases take, still seems pretty fast.
Yeah, especially in 1928, where everything was done by like letter.
Right. There was no email.
No. And like letters don't travel quickly. Also, you got to write them. It sounds exhausting.
Yeah. So while both Sarah and Gordon are being held in British Columbia, they're awaiting their extradition to California. Sarah decides, you know what, I'm just going to tell the truth. And she confesses to the murders, including the murder of 9-year-old Walter Collins. But just before they're extradited to California, she retracts her confession. So does Gordon, who had confessed to killing more than 5 boys. Well, then they're extradited back to California, And after their extradition, she once again says, yeah, okay, we did it. And she pleads guilty to killing Walter Collins. So she's not tried because she confesses. So upon her plea of guilty, Superior Court Judge Morton sentences her to life in prison on December 31st of 1928. He spares her the death penalty. You know why? Good old Judge Morton is a sexist. He spares her because she's a woman, which I guess is the one time being sexist worked out in her favor. I don't know. It's just weird.
I don't. It's things are weird. People make weird decisions. Like what? Like she's not guilty because she's a woman,
right?
Like, that doesn't make any sense.
She still helped murder 4 boys.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I confessed to it in 2 separate countries.
Yes,
She's an international criminal.
But because you're a woman, I'm going to spare you the death penalty. Okay. So in like this weird attempt to save her son during her sentencing hearing, she claimed that her son was completely innocent. And then she makes these wild claims about his parentage, including that he was an illegitimate son of an English nobleman. She also says that she's not his mom, but she's his grandmom, and that he's actually the result of incest between her husband, Cyrus George Northcott, and their daughter. She also says that Gordon, as a child, was abused by the entire family. None of these claims were proven to be true.
She's just throwing everything at the wall.
She's throwing everything to see what sticks.
She's like, she's the son of an English nobleman, so we have to get the crown involved.
Right. She's trying to see what that spaghetti is done. You know, when you throw spaghetti against the wall.
I mean, I've tried that, but usually I just yelled at.
So after she's sentenced, Sarah then attempts to take her own life, and she begs, please, 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 please do not execute my son. She says, I got a square deal. If they'll just be good to my boy, if they'll just be good to my boy, if they just won't hang him. That's what she's saying. I got the square deal if they just won't hang him. Well, she learns that her son is in fact going to be hung. So she pleads, please, please, please hang me as well. Sarah is sentenced. Wow. She serves her time at Tehachapi State Prison. She's paroled. Mind you, she was sentenced to life. She's paroled less than 12 years later. She dies in 1944. Tehachapi, I think. So Gordon, he's implicated in the murder of Walter Collins, but because Sarah had already confessed and been sentenced for it, the state doesn't prosecute him for that murder. It does, though, go after him for others. So it's speculated that he's killed as many as 20 boys, but because they can't provide any evidence, they can't go after him for that. So they bring an indictment against him for the murders of the unidentified young Mexican boy and the brothers Louis and Nelson Winslow. The brothers, who went missing from Pomona. Mm-hmm. So in early 1929, Gordon has a trial. His trial is held before Judge George R. Foreman in Riverside County, California. Gordon insists on representing himself in court after firing several attorneys. He even puts himself on the stand and grills himself by asking and answering his own questions. It doesn't work. As
someone who is very self-involved, I can see myself doing that, but it's never a good idea.
It's not, and it doesn't work out in his favor.
Ever.
So the jury finds him guilty. They heard about the kidnapping and the molestation and the torture and the murder of the young Mexican and the young Mexican boy and the Winslow brothers. And he is found guilty on February 8th of 1929 after a 27-day trial, completely convicted of all those murders.
Can you imagine a jury ever not convicting someone who is questioning themselves on the stand?
No.
I mean, I feel like that's a lot to ask. Like, unless this is Bugs Bunny, like switching characters back and forth.
No, it's not happening. He's going to jail. He's guilty. So on February 13th of 1929, Judge Freeman, he sentences Gordon to death. Gordon is hanged on October 2nd of 1930 at San Quentin State Prison. He's 23 years old. Wow. Remember, he was born in 1906. He's hanged in 1929. Let's talk about Christine Collins again. So Christine still hopeful that her son Walter might be alive, ends up talking to Gordon Northcott before his death. She asks him, "Did you kill my son?" She listens to him lie, and then he confesses, then he recants, and then he lies, and then he confesses, and then he recants. So she says, all right, this guy's insane. He's crazy.
Yeah.
He acts like he doesn't know whether he even had met Walter, much less killed him. So because of that, she clings to the hope that Walter is still alive, although we know he's not.
Yeah.
So Gordon, shortly before he's executed, he sends Christine a telegram saying he lied when he denied that Walter was among his victims. He promises to tell her the truth if she'll just come in person to hear it from him face to face. So literally hours before his execution, Christine visits Gordon Northcott in prison. Once she arrives, he changes his mind and says, "I don't want to see you," when she confronts him.
What
he
a
says,
jackass.
Yeah, he says, "I don't know anything. I'm innocent." So, of course, she's distraught. She's outraged, but she also, again, takes comfort in this because it still gives her hope that maybe that maybe Walter is still alive.
Yeah, I mean, you want to believe, but
some other big players in this story. We've got Reverend Gustav Briegleb. He was a Presbyterian minister and an early radio evangelist. He was the pastor of St. Paul Presbyterian Church in Los Angeles, and he was an activist of sorts. He took up a lot of important causes. One of the causes he took up was the mishandling of the Walter Collins kidnapping case, and he actually fought to have Christine Collins released from the psychiatric ward after the police captain had committed her there because of the, whole, "Hey, this isn't my son" thing.
Yeah, the obvious truth that they didn't want to admit.
Right.
It's like, no, we totally solved this case.
That's your son, even though the dental records don't match. Probably the eye color not even the same, hair color a little different. It's still your kid. Who cares? Take him home. Try him out for a while.
Try him out for a while. Gee whiz.
So Reverend Briegleb, he passes away in 1943 at the age of 61, but he was instrumental in helping to get Christine released. In 1935, 5 years after Gordon's execution, a young boy with his parents come forward and talk to authorities. They state that 7 years earlier, he had gone missing. His parents had reported his disappearance to the police. At the time of his disappearance, authorities speculated that he might have been a victim at Wineville. Sanford, however, never told authorities about a boy escaping from the chicken coop. And records plus Sanford's own testimony indicate that only 3 boys were ever held inside the chicken coop. They were Walter Collins and the 2 Winslow boys, all of whom were actually murdered. There are several references to this whole case in popular culture. In 2008, Clint Eastwood directed the film Changeling that starred John Malkovich and Angelina Jolie, and it's partly based on the Wineville Chicken Coop murders. The film actually centers around Christine Collins and her struggles with the LAPD and her search for Walter. In the film, Gordon was played by Jason Butler Herner. On the radio series Dragnet, there's an episode called The Big Imposter, which was based on the events of the Wineville Chicken Coop murder. It aired on June 7th of 1951. When the series moved to television, the radio script was actually made into a teleplay, which aired on December 4th of 1952. More recently, American Horror Story Hotel, one of its plot lines centered around the murders. There's a flashback of the son of Mrs. Evers, a maid at the Hotel Cortez, who's abducted by a man on Halloween. The surrounding events imply that her son was one of Gordon Northcott's unidentified victims. Because remember, it's been speculated that he had many more. They just didn't have any evidence.
Right. Yeah, and it's unlikely that it was just the 3 that we knew about.
Exactly. On Investigation Discovery, there's a series called Evil Kin. The episode is called Body Farm on season 3. It's episode 12. It focuses on the Wineville Chicken Coop murders, and it looks at the early warning signs of Gordon's pedophilia and his abusive relationship with his nephew, Sanford Clark. It also talks about Jesse's rescue of Sanford and Sarah Louise's obsession with her son. That aired on October 6th of 2015. And of course, one of my favorite shows, Criminal Minds. It had an episode called Haunted that featured a character based on Gordon Northcott called the Hollow Creek Killer. There you go.
It's amazing how many times Criminal Minds pops up in the true crime.
Well, they have like
retellings.
80 seasons, so I mean,
yeah,
they've got to cover something.
Well, I guess, but part of me was like, oh, these guys are really inventive. It was like, no, you're just taking old stories and slightly reinventing them.
Yeah, that's what they do.
Yeah.
But there you go. That is the story of Gordon Northcott and the Wineville Chicken Coop Murders, and that is the B-side.
So for the A-side this week, and in a weird way, it connects a little bit in that we're talking about that guy from that show, and that guy is most famous for being a police detective on TV.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, it is Richard Belzer, who just passed away at the last week. And he is most well known for being on Homicide: Life in the Street, and then, of course, Law and Order Special Victims Unit, where this, the entire B-side feels like it could have been a story that Law and Order SVU would have tackled at some point. Richard Belzer, yeah, I mean, it's like straight out of Law and Order. Richard Belzer, for me, everyone knew him from Homicide: Life in the Street and Law and Order, and I loved him in both of those roles. And his character of John Munch was and is at this point the longest running continuous character on TV. It passed both Marshall Dillon from Gunsmoke and Kelsey Grammer's Frasier for being the same character in multiple series for over 22 years. And then he even showed up on all sorts of other shows. Back when crossovers didn't happen between networks, John Munch, who is his character from Homicide: Life on the Street and Law and Order, showed up in the X-Files, which is a Fox program.
Right.
Like, that just doesn't have, that's how incredible this character was, that two different networks are like, yeah, that's cool, we'll let it happen. We'll promote somebody else's show. But for me, Richard Belzer was a guy that showed up on Lois and Clark: The Adventures of Superman, which I've already talked about, was one of the formative shows of Adam's youth. And he also wrote one of my favorite books of all time about conspiracy theories. And
he wrote a book?
have had, he's wrote 5 books.
Oh.
4 on conspiracy theories, and one about an actor who played a character named John Munch, who then has to solve an actual crime. Which was kind of this whole 10 years ago, there were all these actors that were doing sort of self biographies that were fictional. Like Jean-Claude Van Damme did a whole movie about where he has to be a superhero, and oh goodness, I can't believe I'm forgetting his name. The If Chins Could Kill, he was on Army of Darkness. Bruce Campbell.
Okay, right.
Yeah. He had another one where he did a movie where they were like, oh, we need your character from this show to save us, and they thought he was a real person. So it was this whole late 2000s thing where actors kind of parodied themselves, but then were playing themselves in movies. But in 2000, he came out with a book that I read cover to cover. I have a hardcover version of, which evidently, according to Amazon, if I were to sell it, is worth $150, which I did not see coming. But it's all about conspiracy theories. And what I loved about the book is Richard Belzer himself started out as a stand-up comic. He was a stand-up comic in the 70s and 80s. He was the same era as Chevy Chase and Steve Martin and Robin Williams. They were all doing stand-up in New York. And for some reason,
he's funny too.
he's hilarious, but for some reason he didn't become a huge star. Like when all those guys were making movies in the 80s, he was doing like cable television. And he was the warm-up comic when SNL started for like the audience, but he was never a cast member.
Mm-hmm.
He always felt like he was just right next to superstardom, but never really got there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in the 80s, he had this sort of like late night TV show, and he had Hulk Hogan and Mr. T on right before the first WrestleMania.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yes. And he, like, just being sarcastic, he kept like kind of teasing and baiting Hulk Hogan into using his famous move, and because he didn't think it was real. And Hulk Hogan actually does the move on him. He goes unconscious, falls over, like his Hulk Hogan just releases him, and he falls over and he cracks his head open, ends up like bleeding and like going to the hospital, sues WWE, or at that time WWF, before the World Wildlife Federation realized they had the trademark for way longer.
Right.
I mean, that took like 20 years. Who is the World Wildlife Federation's lawyer? Like, you had the trademark.
You know, they were probably thinking, oh, this isn't going to last. And then 20 years later, they're like, oh, maybe we should do something.
Well, yeah, I guess, I mean, maybe their focus was like, we're just trying to save animals, man. We're not going to court against these wrestler people. And somebody was like, I don't know, these wrestling people got a lot of money. We should probably ask them to help save the animals.
You would think the WWF would change, or the World Wildlife Foundation would, once George the Animal Steel came into the WWF, would be like, you know what, maybe we should separate ourselves. But it was still years after that.
It took it to the 2000s. It was like 25 years. Like, how does that happen?
Yeah.
Anyway, so Hulk Hogan puts him in the sleeper hold. Belzer passes out, cracks his head open, actually sues the Worldwide Wrestling Federation for $5 million. Only gets $500,000, but then immediately buys a house in the south of France with his $500,000, and that's where he has lived since, I think, 1989 or 1988. He was an incredible stand-up comic. He was great at the sort of dry humor, and that all comes through in his book. And it's available on Audible, which you could actually hear him read all of these conspiracy theories. But one of the things that I loved about the book is so many conspiracy theories just give you the reasons you should believe the conspiracy theory. And his entire book spends time telling you why you should believe it and why you shouldn't.
Oh,
and
I like that.
Because he actually gives the counterpoint and gives credence, but then kind of finds a way to refute it, but also say, like, if you don't want to believe it, this is what they say. Because he gives both sides of it, that makes his argument feel so much more powerful. So to this day, I have severe questions about UFOs, JFK, and Elvis, which is the name of the book, which is available on Audible, and you can buy for $150 on Amazon. You can't buy my copy, unfortunately, because I'm not selling it.
The one time you won't sell something.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, this is one time. He wrote 3 other books on conspiracy theories, the novel. He was an incredibly interesting individual. And I mean, he got kicked out of college, which I didn't like doing the research for. He just passed away last week. So, I dove into his background more than I ever had before. I mean, the guy got kicked out of college, junior college, in the 1960s for organizing protests against the administration and for civil rights and things. And he never graduated college. He is a high school graduate. His older brother, or his father, committed suicide after his mother died. First,
isn't that what propelled him to comedy? Was the death of his dad?
Yeah, well, he found his dad first and stopped him, and then a year later, his dad successfully committed suicide, and he was like, forget this. I'm just going to do comedy now, which is, in a very weird way, makes sense because a lot of comedians use comedy to deal with the things that they don't want to deal with. His brother, who was a successful producer and married to a director of Sesame Street, when his wife passed, jumped off, built his luxury high-rise apartment in New York in 2014. a man who has had he grew up and in a very challenging environment. Honestly, an environment that if I didn't know the background, I would feel like it was the opening to a B-side.
Mm-hmm.
He said that the hardest room that he ever had to play was the kitchen because he had to make his mother laugh or she would beat him.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. So this is a guy who grew up with his mother being physically abusive. Then she passes away. His father attempts suicide, finally commits suicide. And instead of becoming a psycho killer, which, to be fair, he had a lot of the same ingredients that some of our B-side stars have
Mm-hmm.
had,
Mm-hmm.
he turns to comedy. And he was divorced twice by the time it was 1980. So in his first, 20, let's see, that would have been 1980, 44. So I'm bad with math. So his first like 40 years of life, he's got two failed marriages that only last a year or 2 years each. So he had everything stacked up against where you were like, well, this guy's just not going to make it. And somehow, whether it was his focus on conspiracy theories or his, just personal outlook, he becomes a stand-up comic. He has all of these jobs where he's adjacent to fame, where he's he's the warm-up act for SNL after being on a stand-up comedy show, skit show that kind of even Lorne Michaels had said inspired what SNL would become.
Mm-hmm.
Lorne Michaels saw that show and then created SNL, but then like didn't bring him along except to be the warm-up act that never gets to be on TV. He's in all these movies where he's got his friends, Chevy Chase and Steve Martin, all these guys that he grew up with on the stand-up comedy tour who put him in movies, but he's never really the star. And then all of a sudden, he stumbles into this role on Homicide: Life in the Street. And in fact, twice he auditioned for it, and twice it didn't go well. Barry Levinson, who was the director, actually had seen Richard Belzer doing stand-up and said, hey, this guy might be perfect for this role. They bring him into audition. It doesn't go well. They send him home, say, like, spend some more time with the script, come back again. Second time, doesn't go well again. But Barry Levinson was like, you know what? I'm the director. I think he should do it. I believe in this guy. I know what I saw on stand-up. He's going to be great. And he becomes this iconic character. But he failed the audition twice.
That's wild.
And he got this role still because the director's like, you know what? I believe in this guy. And John Munch became the, most, as I mentioned before, the most longest running single actor character on TV. He has been a guest star as himself and as John Munch in 6 different networks. So he was on Homicide: Life on the Street, which was on NBC, and Law and Order, which was on NBC. Law and Order: Trial by Jury, also on NBC. But he showed up on The X-Files, something called The Beat, on a network that doesn't even exist anymore, the UPN.
Oh, gosh.
But I was a huge UPN fan. Like, I think I've mentioned Pigsty and Animal, or what was it? Pigsty and Platypus Man.
Uh-huh.
Were two sitcoms on UPN that I loved as a 6th grader, and I missed one night of watching them because I had a basketball game. They got canceled the next week. So to this day, I still feel guilty because I feel like maybe I was the only one. I was the only one keeping them on the air. He also showed up on Arrested Development. He showed up on The Wire. He showed up on 30 Rock playing the same character. He was on Jimmy Kimmel Live. He was on The Wire, for one episode, playing his character, wow. John Munch, because The Wire took place in Baltimore. Homicide: Life in the Street took place in Baltimore.
Yeah,
like Homicide: Life in the Street feels like the prequel to The Wire.
Mm-hmm.
In a lot of different ways. Like The Wire was like what Homicide could have been if it was on cable.
Right.
He showed up on 30 Rock. He was on Law and Order Special Victims Unit, of course, Jimmy Kimmel Live, and he played a character that was not specifically mentioned to be John Munch, but it was the same character on The Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, who we talked about a couple episodes ago. We talked about Nightfall. So the fact that one character showed up on 6 different networks in a time when, I mean, even to this day, like, characters do not cross.
They don't cross networks. They don't.
You just, like, if they do, it's because one network bought the show from another one, or it got canceled on NBC and it shows up on Fox or something.
Right.
Like the only network he didn't show up on was CBS, but that's kind of like CBS is kind of like very silent. Like you couldn't have had him just like showing up on Murder She Wrote, although that would have been great. that would have been perfect if he had shown up on Murder She Wrote. And I love how I'm literally like just going back and making sure he didn't show up on Murder She Wrote, because
that would have been epic.
That would have been so good. Also, in one of the world's worst sequels ever, like the first movie was not good, but also it came out when I was a 15-year-old boy, and this factored into my enjoyment of the movie Species, where it's the alien who comes and then has sex with guys and kills them and eats them.
Right.
Yeah. So he was in Species 2, which even the star from Species 1, I don't think is in Species 2. But of all things, he played the U.S. president, which I want a world where
Richard Belzer is president.
Richard Belzer is the president. So he was on tons of shows. I did not realize, and it makes sense. And one thing that, like, sometimes when you do a deep dive into somebody that you really enjoy, you find out things that you don't love.
Mm-hmm.
And the only thing that I did not love when I went through his biography is later in his life, as a conspiracy theorist, he showed up on Alex Jones.
Oh.
In 2016, after the Boston Marathon bomb.
Oh.
He never went back on it again. He luckily was not involved in much of that, but he did show up on an episode talking about conspiracy theories. And
is that one of the ones he talks about in his book?
No, because the Boston bombing was 2014, I think.
And, okay. And his book is when again?
Yeah, his book is 2000. And it was all like old, like back when conspiracy theories were like fun and like didn't really seem to ruin people's lives.
Right.
Like you could talk about like JFK, UFOs, and Elvis, and now it's all like evidently we should have a national divorce, or
right,
the false flag operation at Sandy Hook and things like that. Like conspiracy theories used to be fun and silly things that you would argue over like 1 or 2 beers with friends. Now they're like way out of control. The book is amazing in that it gives you a lot of the reasons that people believe it, and also all the reasons that people have not believed it.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved it for that, because he gave both sides of it, and usually you don't get that within a book.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, and he does it in such a like sardonic, sarcastic way that you're not really sure what he believes.
Right.
And I think that's the best way to talk about a conspiracy theory, because some of those old conspiracy theories, like, is the moon hollow? Because when the first Apollo mission landed on it, it reverberated like a bell for an hour and a half. That's weird. You don't do that if it's not hollow.
Right.
That's fun, silly conspiracy theories, which really don't change, people's lives. Not, hey, your kid didn't get shot at Sandy Hook, which is kind of where we've gone with conspiracy theory sense. So if you like fun conspiracy theories and silliness, that stuff that happened in the past, and you're not really, it's more that sort of like thought experiment argument as opposed to culture wars, then definitely check out the book. It is available on Audible. If you have Audible subscription, you get it for 1 credit. Otherwise, I think it is like $2.99, and it's narrated by him. And I've been listening to it for the last couple of days. And I think if you could, just like my favorite audiobook of all time is Kitchen Nightmares, but read by Anthony Bourdain.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you get an author who is actually an actor and good at telling their own story to read their book to you, it feels literally like oral history sitting at the fire, like where the elder is telling you about this thing that happened.
Right.
And it brings it so much more to life. I think that is way better than hiring some actor to read it who doesn't have the same connection to the plot. So if you want to have a good time with fun conspiracy theories that are not about culture wars, definitely check out the book UFOs, JFK, and Elvis by Richard Belzer. Also celebrate the fact this man's first actual credit other than being like a bit player on SNL, was on Sesame Street in 1978. So the guy who's most famous for being a very sarcastic cop, his first credit was being on Sesame Street as Man in a Rowboat #1, because there was somebody else in that rowboat, and the reported final words of Richard Belzer, who died last week.
Oh yeah,
on the 19th.
Yeah,
at his home in France that he bought because of Hulk Hogan choking him out, which he called Chateau de Hogan. And moms, both mine and Brooke's, please forgive me for this, but this is a direct quote. One of his best friends, who's also a writer, who was there when he passed, said that his last words were "fuck you, motherfucker."
Yeah, that's very Richard Belzer.
Which is so Richard Belzer. And honestly, even if they're not his last words, I love that his friend decided that that's what we're going to tell everybody.
Yeah, because
that had to be a thing that they agreed on ahead of time.
Yep.
It's like, no matter, like, don't tell everybody my last word was like, no, it was fuck you, motherfucker.
Yeah.
Which I think is great. So I just want to put this out to the entire A-Side B-Side podcast listening group. If I pass away at any point, my words will be the same ones as Plato, which, as my history professor from high school once told me, Plato's last words were, "I drank what?"
Oh my gosh. Oh, by the way, last week you said, because we talked about Raquel Welch, and you said, yes, I just want someone to say, "Oh, damn." My mom said she would absolutely say, "Oh, damn," if you died. So, I
mean, which in a weird way, that is the only time I will be in the same breath as Raquel Welch. Which, I mean, I'm happy about. At least I'm in the same sentence.
Oh, goodness. All right. Is that the A-side?
That is the A-side. So go check out Richard Belzer's entire catalog, listen to his book on Audible, and let's just pretend he was never on Alice Jones.
All right. Of course, you can check out all of our sources on our website, A-Side B-Side podcast at square.site.
And on that website, you can check out our merchandise. There are many coffee mugs you can buy that are very stealable.
Because they've stolen all of yours that you purchased?
Well, so I thought they'd stolen 2, but evidently it was just the kitchen had stolen one of them.
Oh,
so only one of them got stolen, but one was stolen by the kitchen for like 3 weeks.
Okay.
Which just, so that just means that like the guy in the kitchen just loved drinking coffee out of that one mug, which I kind of like better than someone stealing. One guy in the kitchen was just like, "No, this is my mug now." Like he was washing it in the kitchen and just refilling it with coffee. I was like, "Damn, all right."
Oh, that's great. That's great.
Yeah. So you could do the coffee mug thing. We've got t-shirts, sweatshirts, shower curtains, all sorts of stuff. You can buy Brooke a coffee. You can subscribe and like us on all of the platforms, and you can find all of them on there. So if you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, which is I think our #1 listen to service, but also Spotify and others, you can then go to our website and like us on those other ones, which helps us immensely. Even if you don't ever actually listen to us on Spotify, if you just go on there and like it, then we get a little bonus. So if you're feeling like throwing something our way, you can do that as well with no cost if you don't want to buy a coffee mug that you will fall in love with and hide from everyone else. And of course, all of our links to any of the stories that we talk about, any of our sources that we use, if you want to download Richard Belzer's UFOs, JFK, and Elvis, the link to it on Audible will be at our website. You just click right there. Take it to Amazon. You can hit one click to download and listen to it yourself. So anything I missed?
No, I think you nailed it.
Excellent.
Awesome. Well, there we go. That is episode 125. Thanks, Adam.
Thank you, bro.